So good morning. Again, this is Ian Kimbrell from Boundary Systems. Someone's pointing that I need to start one more thing here. Welcome everyone. We very much appreciate the time that you regularly give us for these Wednesday webinars to review some of the latest technology that we're working with here at Boundary Systems. This week, we're excited to present on technology that allows companies to translate data from one CAD system to another in a way that actually keeps all the CAD features intact. So, for example, companies that need to take SolidWorks files and move them to Creo, or Creo files to SolidWorks, or NX to CATIA, and on and on. And while there are technologies out there that can do, general IGES or step translations, the technology we're going to be talking about today is fairly unique in the market because of the feature intelligence. The reason we believe this is an important topic within the product development community is that we at Boundary are seeing more and more requirements for CAD to CAD translations, and many companies want to keep the feature intelligence that are available in one system when they're switching to another system or combining divisions or buying another company. And the reason companies often want to keep feature intelligence is because it makes design changes and design evolution easier and faster for the CAD users. But also because there's often useful engineering intelligence and design intent baked into the feature choices that designers are making in the original design files. So the specific solution we're going to be presenting today is Proficiency. Proficiency is the leading tool for feature-based CAD to CAD translations in the market today. This software solution is developed by our partners at International Technic Group, and we are lucky enough to have Steve Myers, who's one of the senior technical consultants at International Technic Group, available to present the solution, and we will leave time at the end for any questions. So Steve works directly with the development teams that develop the solutions he's going to talk about today. He works with a lot of companies, not just on Proficiency, but other solutions that Technic Group has around translations. And so that's about it. If you see something that's interesting here or you need more information, as always, you can contact me. You can reply back to one of the sales or marketing folks that contacted you originally and just say, I need more information, or I have the following questions, and up and above the time we're going to have at the end of the webinar. So with that, welcome to Steve. Thanks for joining us, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Ian. Good morning, everyone. At least it's morning where I am. Probably getting pretty close to afternoon for some of you, or maybe actually into the afternoon. Ian has already covered the relationship that ITI has with Boundary Systems. That's kind of laid out here on this slide as well. And he gave you a little bit of history about our company, and I don't want to get into the history so much, but just give you a little snapshot here of what ITI is about, beyond what Ian has already shared with you. So we help with various customer initiatives. We have solutions that we apply against those, and our software solutions are developed in a number of different locations throughout the U.S. and some overseas as well. You can see some data about our number of employees and so forth here also. I'm speaking to you from my home in Newberg, Oregon, which is just a little south of Portland. And as Ian mentioned, I'm a technical consultant with ITI, and I work with a lot of different customers on interoperability between CAD tools. We see a lot of customers that have a couple of different tools, or maybe they're migrating from one to another, but for various reasons they find themselves in need, and some of you may find this need as well, to translate between two different systems. And so when we think about this situation where you've been acquired, or maybe you've acquired some data from another company, there are really three questions to keep in mind when you're thinking about a migration or any sort of translation. First is, who's going to use this data after it's translated? what's going to be done with it, and where is it going to be used. I mean, you might need to change units or some other thing about that file as you distribute it to various people, places, and purposes that data is going to be used for. So those are important things to keep in mind. And you know, when you think about, okay, how am I going to accomplish this translation or this exchange of data, there are really three different solution options that we see most often. And one of them is to simply coexist, right? You have maybe some data in SolidWorks and you have some data in Creo, and you need to incorporate those parts or assemblies into your designs, but you don't necessarily want to migrate to one system. So you could coexist, and there are certain solutions for that. PTC has one in Unite technology that could accommodate that sort of a situation. The next one is to simply import or export from the sending system, or what we would call the source system, and then import that into what we at ITI call the target system. I'll use those terms throughout today's discussion, source being where the data is coming from and target being where we're translating the data to. So in a lot of cases, companies will export from the source and import to the target using simple BREP translations like STEP or IGES, or sometimes there are proprietary translators out there that will do a more, I'll say, flavored or customized import-export function for you, but in the end, there's still what a lot of us in the industry call dumb solids when they get to the target system. But sometimes that is a perfectly fine way to move forward, and companies are successful if that meets the need. Then there's also this need sometimes, and Ian mentioned this earlier, where if you need to preserve design intent, and those elements of the design are important to you going forward, and you need to be able to make modifications to the design in the target system, then that's what we would call a migration at ITI, where you want to preserve as much design intent as possible going from one system to another. And as you can imagine, if you haven't already been through it, CAD systems tend to construct geometry for simple features in very similar ways, but other features, there are vast differences in the way these systems build these features. So the technology that we offer enables you to preserve that, and we preserve as much as possible. You know, when you hear feature-based CAD translation, you know, your skepticism meter probably gets pegged in a lot of cases, and that's a natural reaction for all of us in the CAD industry. But we are able to, in many cases, preserve 100%, a lot of cases, I should say, preserve 100% of your design intent, but certainly there are situations where we don't. So, but we do give you as much as possible. And I'll show you the different options or kind of the different ways that we do that and how we guarantee that regardless of the situation, in the end, you get accurate geometry. But just kind of the coexist thing here, which you're probably already familiar with if you've used the Creo Unite technology, is where you simply, in this case, we're just grabbing a SolidWorks assembly and placing it into a Creo assembly. And that would illustrate that principle where you want to just coexist and work with both systems, maintain the design in either system, but you do need to combine them for visibility, fit, and function purposes into an assembly, but you want to leave them in their native system. So PTC and Boundary, by extension, provide you with a great solution for that coexist situation. The import options become, there are really two main ones. But the thing that you get with STEP, of course, there can be some quality issues when you export the STEP. There can be a completely different set of quality issues that come into play when you import the STEP into the target system. And then, of course, in the end, you don't get any features. So the modification is possible with direct modeling techniques or in the Creo Direct and things like that, or using Flex modeling in Creo. You can certainly do some modifications there, but the design intent is not preserved through that process. The next step kind of up from that is a specialized translator that translates a boundary representation or a little bit more reliable solid. Specialized translator for each path, and by path we mean the path from Creo to SolidWorks or NX to CATIA. That's what we call the path in our lingo. But still, no features, and quality can still be an issue there. So while these might be acceptable solutions for some situations, static parts like fasteners or things like that, they still don't provide you with that design intent preservation that you may in fact need in many situations. And this is just a quick example. I'm sure you've all seen a somewhat dirty IGES file come across from system to system, and usually you get a collection of surfaces. Sometimes they're able to be sewn up into a solid if it's not too complex, but you do get geometry that may be clean or not clean, and again, that may be adequate for you, but in the case where you need to have higher quality geometry and more design intelligence built in, we're going to get to that solution here in a moment. But again, this may suffice for you. And of course, when you do have these errors, there are basic tools in most CAD tools that you're going to have. They're going to be basic capabilities to try to fix it, but that becomes kind of an art more than a science. If you've ever experienced that, you know what I'm talking about there. So let's move on then to this idea of migration, where we want to preserve as much design intent as possible. And what you see here is just a simple example of, if you've ever been to PTC training, we partner with PTC as well, and actually I used to be an instructor for them. But anyway, the files you see here might look a little familiar from some training classes you've been to, but what you're seeing is a SolidWorks assembly up top there that was actually translated from the Creo assembly that you see on the bottom. So the bottom right image is the source, and the top left image is the target in SolidWorks. And if you take a look at the model tree there, you can see that we've preserved features in each system so that those parts are fully modifiable. Now, how does this all happen? It happens through a process that is being laid out through the building slide here. What we do is we start with a source CAD tool. We then convert that into an intermediate format, which we call a UPR, for Universal Product Representation. But basically what happens here is that we start on the left-hand side of the slide with any of those systems that you see listed there. We use the API for the source system to export and create this intermediate file, the UPR, and then with that UPR, we then take that into the target system using the API for the target system. So basically what happens, if you really want to simplify it, is we extract data out of the source file, and then we rebuild that data using the API, which gives us access to things like, you know, create an extrude, such and such a depth, using such and such a sketch to do that extrude. So all of that happens automatically in the background, and it happens very quickly, very, very quickly, obviously, compared to trying to manually remaster these models. So what you see over on the left side is all of the source systems that we support, and then the target systems on the right. And you'll notice there that we're really giving you the ability to go from the high and mid-range systems to the three most popular higher end systems there in Creo, CATIA, and NX. And we continue to expand as customer demand dictates to support other systems and to support a wider variety of features as those CAD tools add capability. Then we try to add our capabilities to keep up. What you see in the very middle of the screen, though, this is kind of a busy thing, so I'll kind of break it down for you. So the source CAD model tree is showing there, and that happens to be CATIA, if you recognize that. In the middle, that box is what we call our feature map. So anytime you do a translation using Proficiency, you're going to see this feature map that will tell you what we had in CATIA, and then in this case, we're an older version of NX for this slide, but what we had in CATIA, and then what we got in NX6. And it makes it very easy for you to do a feature-by-feature comparison between what you had in the source system and what you got in the target system. Then, of course, you can see down at the bottom some geometry examples of the result. Now, what we are able to accomplish here is feature-based CAD migration we say up to 100%, right? We don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that 100% of the time we're going to give you all the design intent that you had in your source system is going to be present in your target system. But we do have a very, very high success rate, which comes from the robustness of our translation technology combined with some analysis that we typically do up front before we launch a translation effort to give us some idea of the complexity of the data that we're working with. So those two things kind of work together to help us be as successful as possible. Support for parts, assemblies, and associative drawings. And then we do have some other things that we're going to talk about in the future as we get together with Boundary for more of these webcasts to help you diagnose issues that might come up in translation as well as validate the quality of the translation itself. But those are topics for another session. Let me just hang on. I want to scroll down here to something. Okay. So I guess at this point, we have about 10 minutes left, and I do want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have. This has been a very quick overview of our technology, but if there are any questions, now would be a good time to ask those. And I'm not sure how we're going to open it up for voice, but Nicole or Ian can help us out with that. So if there are any questions you have.
I think the way we're going to do questions is if everybody should have access to the ability to type in a question, and then Steve, that should become under your questions tab. You should be able to see any questions that anybody puts in.
Okay. Yep, I've got the question tab open. So if you do have a question, go ahead and type that in there. While you're thinking of questions or typing them in, I'll tell you a little bit about the engagement model. Now, obviously, if you're interested in this technology or you have a project in mind or you want to learn a little bit more, you'll be contacting Boundary Systems. You have an assigned rep there or the contact information that Ian and Nicole have provided for you. But just to give you an idea how one of these things looks, there are a couple of different ways to go about a migration or translation project with us. One is to simply purchase the software and set it up and use it to do translations internally at your facility. We help you get it set up and tweaked and tuned for the path that you're translating along, and it might be several different paths depending on your situation. So there's that option of actually purchasing the software, probably the most obvious one. But then alternatives to that are if you have translation or migration projects that are of a finite duration, and you just need to do kind of a big bang change from one system to another, and you need to migrate a bunch of data, but then in the future you don't see yourself doing much translation, we can work with you in those situations as well, where we provide it more as a service. So really anything, and really a lot of different things in between those two extremes as well, we can work with you and help you get the best possible result when you need to move from one CAD tool to another. Okay, I think there is a question here. Yeah, let me just... The question is, can it translate from Creo new to Pro Wildfire old, making it reverse compatible? That's a great question because we've all been there with Creo. As I said, I have many years of PTC experience working directly for PTC, and backward compatibility is one of those things that simply doesn't happen by nature. The answer is yes, that can be done. We do, because we don't really care what the source CAD tool is and what the target CAD tool is. We're simply using the APIs for those tools to reconstruct the geometry. So what may happen, and this could happen in any translation as well, is that we may do a translation, and let's say there's a complex sweep feature in the geometry. And the target system, of course, is going to create, or the source system is going to have that geometry fully defined and parametric and associative. When we go to rebuild that feature in the target system, sometimes there isn't the capability, or the systems are so different that we can't duplicate that geometry exactly by automating the feature creation process using the API. When that happens, we actually take that piece of geometry and translate it as a boundary representation. So what you get in the end is all the features and geometry that can be parametric those pieces of geometry that couldn't be translated parametrically are still translated as, we'll call them dumb chunks for lack of better terminology, but basically boundary reps that are stuck onto the model. So you still, in the end, get a accurate geometry, an accurate solid, and the portions that are parametric, that can be parametric, are parametric. Those that aren't are still there in the model. The geometry is accurate. You could attempt the rebuild manually, which some customers do, or you could simply live with that geometry as boundary representation, or you could, in the end, maybe decide to remaster the model completely manually, depending on what the situation is. But the short answer to the question is, yes, we can go from Creo 3, say, back to Wildfire 5. But, you know, certain caveats there. So certain features that are able to be created in Creo 3 might not be so easily or even possible to create back in Wildfire. But the vast majority of the parts, from simple to moderate complexity, are going to be just fine. I think that's the only question I saw, if I'm looking at things correctly here.
Yep, that was the only question, and that's fine. So again, if anybody needs additional information or would like to discuss this technology further, you know, please contact us. And you know, if there's no more questions, we look forward to you guys joining our future webinars. And thanks again to Steve and the Boundary Systems marketing team for setting this up. And we will talk to everyone soon. Thank you.